Step into ancient Egypt, a world of crocodile gods, bizarre beauty rituals, and chilling ceremonies. You won't believe these wild traditions. Imagine a dramatic scene, incense swirling, priests chanting, and a mummy or statue at the center. This was the ancient Egyptian opening the mouth ritual, a sacred ceremony to restore a dead person's senses for the afterlife. By touching the lips with symbolic tools, priests believed they could awaken the soul, allowing it to eat, drink, and speak in the next world. Why all the effort? In Egyptian belief, the soul, or Ka, needed food and drink to survive after death. Without this ritual, the Ka would be cut off, leading to a restless existence. Priests in leopard skins wielded special tools in a performance filled with cosmic significance. This wasn't limited to mummies. Statues of gods and pharaohs underwent the ritual too, symbolically bringing them to life. It's a stunning mix of art, religion, and family devotion that shows the deep respect Egyptians had for both life and death. Imagine walking near the Nile and stumbling upon a massive crocodile, only to see it revered as a god. Sobek, the crocodile-headed deity, was both feared and worshipped in ancient Egypt. Why? The Nile was Egypt's lifeline, providing water and food, but its crocodiles were deadly. Sobek embodied this dual nature. Destruction and fertility rolled into one. Priests in temples like the one at Kom Ombo kept crocodiles as sacred animals, pampering them with food and jewels. When they died, these reptiles were mummified, wrapped with care, and buried in special tombs. It wasn't just superstition. Sobek symbolized strength, protection, and the life-giving power of the Nile. Crocodiles were seen as Sobek's living form, and people believed honoring him kept the river flowing and the reptiles calm. Festivals were held in his honor, and his followers would offer food and riches at shrines. Strange? To modern minds, absolutely. But for Egyptians, worshipping Sobek was their way of taming nature's wild power and ensuring prosperity for the land. Now picture a person with fiery red hair walking through ancient Egypt. Sounds rare, right? That's because it was, and it wasn't always seen in a good light. Red hair was considered a mark of Set, the god of chaos, deserts, and storms. Set was often depicted as an unpredictable villain, fighting Horus for control of the universe. Some people feared that red-haired individuals carried his volatile spirit, making them suspicious or even unlucky. But here's where it gets even stranger. Not all redheads were shunned. Rameses II, one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, reportedly had red hair, though mummification preserved it differently than we might think. In his case, the rare trait was linked to power and divine ancestry. Red-haired animals, like cows or donkeys, were sometimes sacrificed to appease Set and bring balance to the world. Whether cursed or revered, red hair was never just a color, it was a symbol that could change a person's fate. Ancient Egyptians cared a lot about cleanliness and beauty. But their routines often went to extremes. They wore heavy black kohl eyeliner, believing it protected their eyes from the sun and warded off evil spirits. But this kohl contained lead, which was toxic over time. They shaved their entire bodies, including heads, to stay clean and lice-free. Wigs made of human hair, sometimes perfumed, replaced natural locks and became a sign of beauty and status. Now take a look at this image. A strange dance-like pose with one person holding sharp tools while another leans backward dramatically. What's happening here? Historians suggest it may represent a hygiene ritual, perhaps body hair removal. Egyptians used sharp bronze razors and tools for grooming, turning self-care into an elaborate ceremony. They even bathed several times a day using natron salt as soap. But despite their efforts, their methods often did more harm than good, proof that looking good sometimes came at a steep price. While hygiene was a priority, privacy wasn't. Bathing was often a social affair, and public baths were common. Many Egyptians took daily dips in the Nile, scrubbing with natural substances like clay or natron salts. Homes of the wealthy included private bathing areas, but for most, communal spaces were the norm. Public bathhouses served as hubs for both cleanliness and conversation, a mix of necessity and community life. Toilets, though, were another matter. Even the wealthiest Egyptians didn't have the plumbing we'd recognize today. Instead, stone or wooden seats with pots underneath were used, sometimes shared among families or even workers in large households. The waste was removed and repurposed as fertilizer for crops. Nothing went to waste in ancient Egypt. Though it sounds unsettling to modern ears, communal toilets reflected the Egyptians' practical mindset. For them, hygiene was about balance, staying clean while keeping nature and society in harmony. Ancient Egyptians didn't just love cosmetics in life, they believed beauty mattered even in death. Mummies were often prepared with coal-lined eyes, their faces touched up with rouge and other pigments to restore a living look. Why? The Egyptians believed appearance was vital for the afterlife. Looking presentable meant the soul would be recognized and welcomed by the gods. Kohl, that striking black eyeliner, wasn't just for style, it had a protective purpose too. It was thought to shield the dead from evil spirits and the blinding glare of the sun god Ra on their journey to eternity. Interestingly, these cosmetics were applied with the same precision as in life, using tools made of ivory, stone, or glass. Ointments were added to keep the mummy's skin moist and prevent decay, while perfumes like myrrh helped mask unpleasant odors. Imagine standing in a tomb, watching priests carefully paint and anoint a lifeless body with oils, as chants echoed through the stone walls. It was all part of ensuring the dead entered the afterlife with grace and dignity, looking as royal as they once were in life. Once the dead were ready, they faced the most critical test, the weighing of the heart ceremony. Picture this, a grand cosmic courtroom where the deceased stands before Osiris, the god of the underworld. At the center, a giant scale holds two objects. On one side, the person's heart, believed to contain their deeds and soul. On the other, the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart weighed heavier than the feather, it meant the soul was burdened with sin, and judgment was swift. The heart would be devoured by Ammit, a terrifying creature part lion, crocodile and hippo. For Egyptians, a light heart meant a pure life, and it granted the deceased eternal bliss. Priests recited prayers from the Book of the Dead, guiding the soul through this nerve-wracking trial. Imagine the suspense. Would the heart pass the test, or be condemned forever? The ceremony wasn't just mythology. It reflected how deeply Egyptians valued morality and justice. It was a spiritual balancing act that determined one's fate for eternity. What if you could sleep in a temple to heal an illness or receive divine advice? That's exactly what ancient Egyptians did. Known as incubation, this practice involved sleeping overnight in sacred temples, hoping for dreams sent by the gods. Sick individuals or those seeking answers would lie on mats or stone benches surrounded by statues of deities. Priests acted as dream interpreters, translating visions into messages from gods like Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, or Imhotep, a god of healing. These sleepovers weren't as restful as they sound. Rituals often involved fasting, drinking herbal concoctions, or being surrounded by incense-heavy air to invite dreams. Some dreamed of cures, like which herb to use or which god to pray to, while others awoke with cryptic visions that only the priests could decode. Imagine the mix of desperation and hope, waiting for a sign from the divine in the stillness of a sacred hall. It may sound strange now, but to Egyptians, dreams were the ultimate connection between mortals and gods, a lifeline to healing or answers no earthly doctor could provide. If dream cures sound mystical, here's where things get downright chilling. The cannibal hymns. Found in the pyramid texts, these ancient writings describe a pharaoh who devoured his enemies, not literally, but symbolically. The texts say the pharaoh consumes their magic, eats their knowledge, and swallows their power. In other words, by ritually eating conquered foes, the pharaoh absorbed their strength, ensuring his dominance both in this life and the afterlife. This practice wasn't about actual cannibalism, but about power. In Egyptian belief, consuming something, whether food, animals, or symbolic enemies, meant taking on its essence. The cannibal hymns elevated the pharaoh to a godlike status, unstoppable and divine. Picture priests chanting these verses as the pharaoh ascended to his throne in the afterlife, a conqueror of souls and spirits. It was a chilling mix of religion and politics, reinforcing the pharaoh's authority over life, death, and even the gods themselves. When it comes to food, ancient Egyptians had a diet that was both fascinating and, at times, strange. Bread was the undisputed staple, but it often came with an unexpected crunch. Why? Sand and grit from grinding stones would mix into the dough, wearing down people's teeth over time. On the protein side, fish, geese, and ducks were common, while wealthier Egyptians enjoyed beef on special occasions. But here's where it gets odd. They ate lotus flowers. The petals were dried, ground, and turned into flour, while the seeds were roasted like popcorn. To sweeten meals, Egyptians relied on honey, considered a delicacy. For the less fortunate, locusts or raw onions often made up a meal. Basic, but nutritious. They also believed certain foods had magical properties. Garlic, for instance, wasn't just for flavor. It was eaten to boost strength and ward off illness. This diet, strange as it sounds, reflected their practical approach to food, survival, sustenance, and a little splash of symbolism. If bread was the food of life, beer was the drink that made it complete. In fact, Egyptians considered beer so essential that it was consumed by everyone, men, women, and even children. But this wasn't the kind of beer you'd sip at a modern bar. Egyptian beer was thick, cloudy, and far less alcoholic, often closer to liquid bread than a nice cold lager. It was made from fermented barley loaves, soaked in water until a frothy, nutritious drink formed. Workers building the pyramids were paid in beer rations, up to a gallon a day. It wasn't just a thirst quencher. Beer was packed with calories and nutrients, making it vital for survival. Even in death, beer followed Egyptians to the afterlife. Jars of the drink were placed in tombs to ensure the deceased would never go thirsty. To the Egyptians, beer wasn't just a beverage, it was a lifeline, social glue, and a sacred gift from the gods. Speaking of beer, let's talk about one of ancient Egypt's wildest traditions, the Feast of Drunkenness. Once a year, Egyptians would gather for an all-out celebration dedicated to the goddess Hathor, the mistress of love, music, and joy. But this was no ordinary feast. People drank themselves into a stupor on purpose. The goal was to honor a myth where Hathor transformed into a vengeful lioness. To calm her fury, the gods tricked her into drinking beer dyed red to resemble blood. She drank so much she passed out, saving humanity. The festival mirrored this myth, with beer flowing endlessly in Hathor's honor. Revelers sang, danced, and celebrated until they collapsed in drunken sleep, believing this act of intoxication brought them closer to the gods. It sounds wild by today's standards, but for Egyptians, it was a way to connect with the divine, through joy, music, and yes, gallons of beer. But the Egyptians didn't reserve their rituals for humans alone. Enter the world of animal mummies, a practice as fascinating as it was bizarre. Cats, crocodiles, baboons, and even falcons were mummified in vast numbers. Why? Animals were seen as sacred messengers of the gods, and mummifying them was a way to honor these divine creatures. For example, cats represented Bastet, the goddess of home and fertility. Thousands of cat mummies have been found in temples, wrapped delicately in linen and buried with care. Some animals were also mummified as offerings. Worshippers would pay priests to embalm an animal and dedicate it to a god, hoping for divine blessings. Crocodiles mummified for Sobek, falcons for Horus. The list goes on. However, not all these mummies were genuine. Mass production led to some priests creating fake mummies, wrapping empty bundles of linen to meet demand. Whether real or fake, animal mummies reflect the Egyptians' deep reverence for nature and their belief that even the smallest creature had a role in the cosmic order. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs weren't just rulers. They were considered living gods, direct links between the heavens and earth. To keep their divine blood pure, many pharaohs married within their own families. Yes, that meant brothers marrying sisters, uncles marrying nieces, and sometimes even parents marrying children. While this sounds shocking to us, for the Egyptians, it was a sacred act to ensure the pharaoh's godlike status remained untarnished. They believed such unions mirrored the relationships of their gods, like Isis and Osiris, a brother and sister pair. Take King Tut, for example. Historical records show he married his half-sister Ankhesenamun. While these marriages ensured royal legitimacy, they also brought unintended consequences, genetic issues. Many mummies, including Tutankhamun's, reveal physical deformities likely caused by inbreeding. Yet for Egyptians, the symbolism outweighed the risks. Marrying family members wasn't taboo. It was an act of cosmic importance, a tradition that placed their pharaohs firmly among the gods. With divine marriages securing their bloodline, pharaohs also had unique ways of displaying power, and one of the strangest was wearing fake beards. Beards in ancient Egypt were symbols of divinity and authority, but here's the twist: even female rulers wore them. Queen Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most powerful female pharaohs, famously donned a ceremonial beard to reinforce her legitimacy as ruler. She may have been a woman, but with her false beard and male regalia, she declared herself equal to any king. These beards weren't your average facial hair. Crafted from metal, leather, or woven materials, they were strapped on during religious ceremonies and public events. The style itself mattered. A long, curved beard was reserved for gods, while shorter, straight beards symbolized earthly rulers. For Egyptians, the beard wasn't about gender, it was about power. Whether male or female, wearing one connected rulers to the divine, emphasizing their godlike right to command. But even the mightiest pharaohs fell sick, and when they did, Egyptians turned to remedies that ranged from ingenious to downright bizarre. Their medical knowledge was surprisingly advanced. Papyrus scrolls show they could set broken bones, stitch wounds, and diagnose illnesses, yet their treatments often mixed science with magic. For headaches, doctors prescribed crushed onions rubbed on the temples. For a cough, a mixture of honey and boiled dates. Sounds harmless, right? Well, it gets weirder. Toothaches were treated with a paste made from ground mice, while other remedies included lizard blood and donkey dung. Why such strange cures? Egyptians believed that sickness wasn't just physical, but often caused by evil spirits or displeased gods. So, alongside practical treatments, priests would recite spells or place amulets on the patient to drive away supernatural forces. To them, medicine wasn't just a science, it was a sacred art, blending the natural and spiritual worlds to bring healing and balance. For illnesses that couldn't be cured with magic or strange remedies, Egyptian healers sometimes turned to surgery. One of their boldest techniques was trepanation, or drilling holes into the skull. It sounds barbaric, but trepanation was an attempt to relieve pressure, pain, or even release evil spirits trapped inside a patient's head. Evidence of this has been found on ancient skulls, some showing signs of healing, proof that the patient survived the procedure. The tools used were simple yet effective. Sharp knives and drills, likely made of bronze, were sterilized with fire. Skilled practitioners carefully cut or drilled into the bone, while others held the patient steady. Considering this was thousands of years ago, the survival rate was surprisingly high. Trepanation may seem horrifying today, but it reflects the Egyptians' advanced understanding of anatomy and their determination to save lives, no matter how extreme the method. If you think fashion trends today are strict, imagine living in ancient Egypt, where clothing wasn't just about style. It was about status, purity, and even morality. The Egyptians had a love affair with linen, and for good reason. Linen was lightweight, breathable, and perfect for the scorching heat of the Nile Valley. But not just any linen would do. The finer and whiter the fabric, the higher your status. Wealthy Egyptians wore garments made from ultra-sheer linen, so delicate it was nearly transparent. It was their version of luxury fashion, a statement of power and refinement. The lower classes weren't so lucky. They wore rougher, coarser linen, and their clothing was far simpler. Basic kilts for men, and plain dresses for women. But cleanliness was key for everyone, regardless of rank. Egyptians washed their clothes constantly, and priests took this obsession to the extreme, wearing freshly laundered linen and changing outfits multiple times a day to maintain spiritual purity. Breaking these rules? Unthinkable. Dirty or improperly worn clothing wasn't just a faux pas, it was seen as an insult to the gods themselves. For Egyptians, clothing wasn't just fabric, it was a thread connecting humanity to the divine. Imagine walking into a medieval doctor's chamber. You're feeling feverish, weak, or perhaps just off. The doctor's solution? Let's drain some of your blood. Welcome to bloodletting, the cornerstone of medieval medicine. Physicians believed that illness was caused by an imbalance in the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. By removing excess blood, they thought they could restore harmony and health. The process was as dramatic as it sounds. Doctors or barbers used sharp blades to make incisions in veins, often collecting the blood in a bowl. Some treatments were small and targeted, while others left patients visibly weakened. Wealthy individuals were bled on specific auspicious days, aligning their health with astrological signs. For more precision, bloodletting charts showed exactly which veins to target depending on the illness. It wasn't uncommon for someone to lose pints of blood in a single session. Unsurprisingly, patients often left sicker than when they arrived. Bloodletting may sound shocking, but medieval doctors genuinely believed in it. It persisted for centuries, even into the 18th century, and became a symbol of how medicine could swing wildly between science and superstition. But if slicing open veins wasn't extreme enough, the next cure took things to an even creepier level. If bloodletting with blades seemed too intense, medieval doctors turned to leech therapy. Leeches were placed on patients' skin to suck out bad blood in a gentler, hands-off approach. Once full, they'd drop off, having consumed several ounces of blood. This wasn't just a strange trend, it became a booming industry. Swamp collectors lured leeches by letting them attach to their own legs, while monasteries bred leeches to sell as medical tools. Leeches were trusted for treating headaches, infections, and more. Surprisingly, modern science shows leeches secrete anticoagulants that improve circulation, making this one of the few medieval treatments that had some merit. Still, as creepy as it sounds, leeches were part of a desperate attempt to fight illness and survive in a grim world obsessed with death. During the late Middle Ages, death became an obsession. The Dance of Death, a haunting artistic tradition, spread across Europe as the Black Death ravaged populations. Skeletons were depicted dancing with kings, peasants, and priests, an eerie reminder that death came for everyone, no matter their rank. These chilling murals and illustrations appeared in churches, manuscripts, and public spaces. In them, skeletons mocked humans, dragging them into an eternal dance. The message was clear: life is fleeting, and no one escapes death. Yet, amid the fear, the art offered dark humor and unity in confronting mortality. The Dance of Death even inspired performances and rituals. Villagers staged skeletal parades, using them as cathartic ways to process grief and find meaning in chaos. Facing death head-on gave medieval people an odd sense of comfort, a way to bring order to a world filled with uncertainty. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, unable to move as a shadowy figure presses down on your chest. For people in the Middle Ages, this wasn't just a bad dream. It was a terrifying encounter with a supernatural being. This phenomenon, now understood as sleep paralysis, was known as Old Hag Syndrome. Many believed a demonic creature, often described as a hag or witch, sat on their chest, stealing their breath or even trying to claim their soul. Nightmares weren't seen as harmless, they were feared as omens, curses, or signs of possession. People went to extreme lengths to protect themselves. Amulets, prayers, and holy water were used to ward off evil spirits lurking in the darkness. Some believed placing iron objects like knives or horseshoes near the bed would keep hags at bay. Dreams themselves were seen as powerful messages, good or bad, from God, the devil, or restless spirits. Waking up gasping for air wasn't just frightening, it felt like a real brush with the supernatural. This fear of the unseen made every night a potential battleground, where sleep itself became a dangerous gamble. That's about it. Write in the comments which tradition seemed the most unusual to you. For more useful information, watch other videos.